everyone, and welcome to Modern Indigenous Voices, a Youth Celebrate Diversity Indigenous Peoples Day webinar and celebration. My name is Etsu Burku, and I'm one of the co-chairs for YCD's Colorado Student Board. Tonight, we'll be celebrating Indigenous Peoples Day with some incredible activists working in the community. But first, I want to introduce Youth Celebrate Diversity Colorado. Youth Celebrate Diversity is dedicated to educating and empowering youth in order to advance inclusion and equity for all. We believe that education is a fundamental human right and one of the critical tools every young person needs to succeed in life. We believe that change must come from within a community and not from outside forces. We're working towards a more just and equitable society that values every human being. We believe in the young people who will lead us to this vision. So on behalf of all of you Celebrate Diversity, welcome everyone. Now to start our program off tonight, I'll be introducing our MC in 2022 YCD adult mentor, Mason Estes. Mason Estes is a Jolla Band Luiseño Indigenous activist born in Boulder, Colorado. Mason graduated from Broomfield High School in 2018 and from the University of Denver in 2022 with a Bachelor of Science in Marketing from the Daniels College of Business. Mason has served as the DU Student Body Vice President, a member of DU's Native Student Alliance, and served as a founding member of DU's Native American Indigenous Advisory Council. Mason is currently working in community organizing and as a project coordinator for the Colorado law firm Native American Human Rights Fund. Mason looks forward to a future in service to his family and his community and supporting youth in their journey as leaders.
Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. Miju matacha, buenas noches. Thank you all so much for taking the time to be here. My name is Mason Estes. I'm La Jolla Band Luiseño. I cannot say how much of a pleasure it is to be with you all this evening and joining us all in this Indigenous Peoples Day celebration. But before we get things kicked off here this evening, I want to take a quick moment to acknowledge the land that YCD Colorado belongs to and the land that I'm webinaring in from here tonight, the land of the Arapaho, Cheyenne, the Oglala Lakota, and the 40 plus other tribes that call this their ancestral home. I think it's really important for us to acknowledge the land that we are on, the places that we occupy, and the space that we occupy. An acknowledgement is only the beginning for us to recognize our commitment to the original stewards of this land and our responsibility as the stewards of this land today. So I want to make sure that as we go into this space, we come purposefully with peace and goodwill in our hearts so that way we all can have a fun time this evening celebrating Indigenous people across the globe and especially celebrating the Indigenous people we have here with us this evening. As we go into this, I want to give a quick overview about what our program will look like this evening. Beginning with these introductions, and thank you again so much, Etsu, and to all of the YCD student board for the year 2022. Very excited to see you all this next Monday. But this next section that we're going to have here, we have our two wonderful program hosts or participants this evening, Leela and Lily Joy, who will be giving presentations here this evening. So that's going to take up the middle section. And then after that, I want to open it up to an open dialogue with us and our panelists. Between Leela and Lily Joy, we have amazing lived knowledge and some amazing personalities and some amazing people with us. So I want to be able to have an open conversation with that. At the end there, we'll give some closing remarks and hopefully have this wrapped up by the top of the hour. We may go over a little bit, we may go a little bit short, but so long as we're having fun, why rush it, right? So without any further delay, I want to welcome in a good friend of mine for a really long time, someone who I'm absolutely, it's a pleasure to be with you this evening, Miss Leala Pourier. Leala Pourier is Oglala Lakota and Cheyenne River. She is a senior at the University of Denver, majoring in English and minoring in critical race and ethnic studies. They're an environmental activist that works in raising awareness for the environmental connections to missing and murdered Indigenous women, as well as fighting for Indigenous environmental justice. So Leela, thank you again so much for being here tonight. How are you doing?
Thanks, Mace. I'm doing really good. Thanks for having me here. I'm really excited to share with you guys. Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen if that's cool.
Wonderful.
Maybe, hold on. Okay. Sorry, I should have had this more set up.
No, it's always the first rule of webinars is that it always takes an extra second when screen sharing. So totally.
Yeah, that's true. Okay. Let's try this. Share. Okay, I don't know why this is being so difficult. Cool.
There we go.
Okay, cool. Can you see the actual presentation, or are you seeing my presentation notes?
I'm seeing the notes.
Oh, God dang it. Okay, we'll just do it without the notes. I don't need it. Sorry, everyone. All right.
It looks great though.
Thanks. All right, now that that's all over. Yeah, I'm Leala Pourier. Thanks for the introduction, Mason. I just greeted you all with a open heart and a warm handshake. And I'm going to talk with you guys tonight about the importance of Indigenous voices and Indigenous knowledge in the environmental movement. So this is just a little bit about me. My Oglala name is Oyate. That means she leads the people. I am Oglala Lakota and Cheyenne River, as well as Italian on my mom's side. And then, yeah, as Mason was saying, I'm a creative writing major and a critical race and ethnic studies minor at DU. These are just some photos of stuff that I have done in the past, as well as my dog, who is sitting right next to me. I was fortunate enough last year to go to Glasgow, Scotland for COP26, the climate conference with all the different world leaders, politicians, as well as other invested parties. I've talked on stage a few times at different venues. Mason, you're actually in that photo right there. Right here. And then, yeah, I was also like, my biggest claim to fame is I got to do a voting rights PSA with Mark Ruffalo, Mark Hamill, and Paul Rudd. So that's like my biggest bragging thing. But yeah, let's get started. So I'm going to talk to y'all about the environmental roots of the environmental movement, and how it's actually pretty rooted in racism, anti-indigeneity, and anti-Blackness. It's important to talk about the racist roots of the environmental movement, because it's important to know how it shapes what we know as the environmental movement today. So this opening quote is actually from Michael Brune. He's the current executive director of the Sierra Club, and he wrote this open letter in 2020 that I really encourage y'all to read, kind of acknowledging what the founders of Sierra Club were responsible for and how they're going to do better. So the first quote is, "The conservation of nature and the conservation of the white race." That was the mindset of a lot of these, founding fathers of this movement. So, first one, we have John Muir. He's kind of the most famous. We have the Muir Woods. We have, he was the first president of Stanford. He was also literally called the father of environmentalism. But he truly believed that natives and Black people tainted the beauty of nature. And that's why we needed national parks. That's why we needed national forests to protect nature from these people. And then we have people like Henry Fairfield Osborn. He was the first head of the New York Zoological Society, which did a lot of work with species preservation. He was also the co-founder of the American Eugenics Society. And then everybody knows Theodore Roosevelt. He's like one of the most popular presidents. He was known as the conservation president. And he was known for that because he started the national parks, the national forest systems, things like that. But in doing that, he took 86 million acres of tribal land for those systems. That Indian. So I kind of wanted to end, this terrible overview of the history of the environmental movement with this quote. Muir's sacred Yosemite was not a garden tended by God, as he wrote so passionately about. It was a garden tended by Native people. And I want you guys to keep this quote in mind as we continue on to what modern day, not going to work for me. There we go. What modern day environmentalism looks like. And so we have when we start thinking about, this idea that the founding fathers of environmentalism thought that God tended this beautiful garden of nature, and it was actually indigenous peoples, that we are now, not just environmental activists, but ecologists, different climate scientists are finally starting to notice that indigenous knowledge is what truly took care of the land for all these generations. And by blocking that ability to do so, it has severely exacerbated the climate crisis as we know it. So these are just a few headlines over the years of more and more media attention going to the importance of this knowledge when it comes to helping healing our planet. The biggest one was in 2020. We knew of all these, we know all the terrible fires that happened in California. I mean, here in Colorado, it was like turning our air, it was turning our sky like red. It was terrible fires. And it's because for so long, for generations and generations, the California tribes practiced controlled burns because they knew they saw it as healing. That's what heals the forest. So things like this wouldn't happen again. But because of colonization, those practices went away. They started being prohibited. They weren't allowed to do it anymore. And because of that is when we see those catastrophic fires like we saw in 2020. And we see them even here in Colorado, across the country, across the world. And it's because for so long, this indigenous knowledge has been kind of snuffed out. It's been valued because indigenous people, the goal was total annihilation. That includes the things that we learned about the earth and how to best take care of it. So as we start to look at this idea that indigenous justice is climate justice, it's our knowledge that's going to help heal this planet. It's our ideas of stewardism, of, we don't just exist on this land. We don't own this land. We are here to help take care of it. We're here to coexist, to help each other, to support each other. And while we're thinking about that, it is also important to note that we have many different issues within our own countries, within our own communities, that are prohibiting us from truly helping, this planet. It's easy to say that indigenous knowledge is what's going to save this planet, when in reality, we can't do all that on our own, especially when we have so many other things in our community going on. So I do want to take the time to talk to you guys about missing and murdered Indigenous women. It is a really heavy topic, and I am going to be talking about rape and sexual assault. So just kind of that trigger warning, content warning out there that the next slides are going to be talking about that. So one of the biggest issues in Indian country right now is missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit individuals. And so these statistics come from a report released in 2016. So they are a little bit outdated, but considering this is also a very new topic that has not really been documented before, it's amazing that we have these statistics in the first place. So 4 out of 5 of our Native women are affected by violence today. The US Department of Justice found that American Indian women face murder rates that are more than 10 times the national average. Homicide is the 3rd leading cause of death among 10 to 24 years of age, and the 5th leading cause of death for American Indian and Alaskan Native women between 25 and 34 years of age. And Indigenous women are 2.5 times more likely to be raped than any other ethnicity. So the reason I am kind of, I'm not just showing you these terrible, horrible statistics to shock you, to, make you feel terrible or anything. I'm showing these because when I talk about these issues that we are currently going through, it's not something small or simple. It is deeply violent and it is deeply systemic. And those systems have been put in place for so long, and they are the same systems that have kind of, suffocated that Indigenous knowledge, that have locked away who we are and what we can offer to help the earth. And this is the same system that is also leading to extremely high rates of violence towards our Native women and girls and Two-Spirit individuals. And nobody's doing anything about that. So I'm bringing awareness to this because I want you guys to consider that when you talk about environmentalism, it is not just about the planet. There's so many intersections that comes with it, and this is one of them. And I talk about this in regards to the environmental movement because it is actually known that a big cause of missing and murdered Indigenous women come from oil extraction. When long ago, when they pushed us all onto reservations, they pushed us onto desolate land, that the goal was that we would die off on this land, that we can't thrive on this land. Fast forward several generations, we are still here, but now oil has been found on this land. So it's actually kind of a myth when oil companies say that their rigs will create jobs, because in most times they bring in labor, they bring in men, they bring in workers, often men, that's why I said men, to come work on these oil sites. And it's usually in really desolate areas, in communities that they don't know about. And they put them in what has been kind of coined as man camps. In these man camps, they're usually like temporary housing, like mobile homes. They could be like blocks of apartment buildings that the company has rented out, things like that. And for example, the one that kind of has the most statistics reported on about it is what happened in the Bakken oil field in North Dakota. So the pipelines directly expose Indigenous people to non-natives who have the potential to commit heinous crimes with limited repercussions due to federal jurisdictional law. So it's been shown that not just have sex crimes grown in areas like these, but also just other violent crimes, robbery, violent assault, things like that. And because they happen often on tribal land or near tribal land against a tribal citizen, that's when the law gets really messy, jurisdiction comes into play, and oftentimes the federal government will kind of just drop it because it's too much hassle. And so when the Bakken oil field happened, and it had one of the largest man camps ever, sexual assaults on the women of the Fort Berthold Reservation increased by 75%. And since the oil boom, Native communities have reported an increased rates of human trafficking, sex trafficking, and missing and murdered Indigenous women in their communities. I don't know, I think the most, if you know, just to kind of give a mainstream example, if you've seen the movie Wind River, that is kind of what this is referring to, that these oil sites are posing direct threats to not just our planet. We're not just hurting the planet, the earth. We are hurting women. We are hurting the women who come from cultures where they're, as matriarchs, their information, their stories, their knowledge is incredibly valued and passed down. And it is a known tactic when it comes to genocide and systemic oppression that you go after the woman, because that's often who carries the culture. So that is why I talk a lot about missing and murdered Indigenous women in regards to the environment, because there are so many different intersections with this climate crisis that are often forgotten. You know, yes, it is terrible and it is awful that the polar ice caps are melting, and you are seeing these terrible pictures of these starving polar bears, and that's terrible. But this is also happening to human beings that are a lot closer to you than the polar ice caps. And I think it's important that we have to acknowledge that, we have to put that face on it, because it humanizes it more. It makes it more real for people that this is not just our planet. This is not just animals being hurt. These are communities, these are daughters, these are wives, these are mothers who are being directly affected by these extractive companies that are hurting our earth as well. And so I really just wanted to take this time tonight to talk about that. I know it's a really heavy subject, so I really appreciate you guys letting me hold this space to discuss it. These are some resources to support. They do a lot of work, direct work with Indigenous communities and helping the missing and murdered Indigenous women epidemic. But thank you all for letting me share tonight. I'll stop sharing my screen.
Leela, you've done it again. I swear, every time I get to hear you talk, I'm always so impressed about the wisdom and how much knowledge you bring into these spaces. So, especially for how long you and I have been friends, I can not say how much I appreciate you and how much I appreciate you being with us this evening. Without any other further ado, next up, we have Lily Joy Winder. Lily is a Diné and Southern youth activist attending Stanford University. She currently has a booming following of 260,000 people on TikTok. And hopefully, Lily, we can have you drop your @ into the chat so that way everybody can come and follow you. For her, her TikTok page on Native activism. Recently, she's been focusing on her campaign, #PeopleNotMascots, a campaign to get rid of the offensive Native American mascots in the United States public school systems. Lily plans on dedicating the rest of her life to working on shedding light on Native experiences, cultures, and Native people. Lily Joy, thank you so much for being with us tonight. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. I just got back from my classes, so kind of tired, but excited to be coming, talking to you guys. I'm here in California at Stanford right now. I don't have a presentation for y'all as Leela does. That Leela had also, that was an amazing presentation. Talked about a lot of things that it was very beautiful. So like having to follow that was a little scary, but anyway. So anyway, I kind of got a little bit of a last minute notice for this, but I was really, really excited to talk to young people about indigeneity, and I do a lot of work with Native mascots, and so I'm super excited to be here today to come and talk to you guys about that. So if this seems a little bit rambly, I apologize. I have some notes here, but I do tend to ramble, so I apologize in advance. So I would like to say first about the Native mascot issue is that it's the heart of many issues, very intersectional issue. So the APA said back in 2005 that Native mascots cause Native children to distance themselves from their culture, have worse in belief in self, perform worse academically. So obviously this is an issue of educational equality as well, because we have Native students going to class and having a worsened educational experience than their peers. On top of that, we're teaching historical and cultural inaccuracies to non-Native people about who Native people are, what Native people look like, what Native, like the modernity of Native people, like how we are still here, I think is a really big fault of the public education system. And talking about culture, we are doing everything that we can to preserve culture right now because of residential schools and the history of residential schools. My grandparents were taken from their home and forced to go to residential schools, and they had their hair cut and were stripped of their language. And because of that, they were so scared it was going to happen again that they did not teach my mother or any of her siblings the Navajo language. And on my father's side as well, I do not know the Navajo language, which is really difficult. So I've taken time to try and learn a little bit of myself, learn a little bit of Diné Bizad Navajo myself. But yes, we're trying to hold on to culture. So when we have these Native mascots that are making Native children want to distance themselves from their culture, that is going to impact all of our efforts to preserve culture. Also, it's a humanization issue. Leela talked about MMIW, MMIP, missing and murdered Indigenous people. I think what's something that's hasn't been talked about as much in the Native mascot issue is this issue of humanization. When Native people are being portrayed as racist caricatures, how are people supposed to graduate from these schools, see this imagery nationally, and go back and to wherever they live or to wherever they go and treat Native people like human beings? Because it is obvious that from the imagery and media that we see and consume now, that Native people are not treated like human beings. As Leila said, like 80% of Native women have experienced violence in their lifetime. Half have been sexually assaulted, including myself, and a third of Native women are raped in their lifetime, including close family members of mine. And so this is an issue of humanization as well, which is why I am so passionate about the Native mascot issue, and working to do something very palpable on trying to work on federal legislation to make it so the federal government bans Native mascots unless a specific for public schools K through 12, unless the school has specific tribal consent, their nearest surrounding tribe has specific tribal consent to have said mascot, which is something that I'm really passionate about, really excited about. If you guys keep up with what I'm doing, you'll probably see more about that in the future. Still kind of waiting to see how midterms work out and stuff like that. But I would regret not giving any of you guys like advice and calls to action. I think in terms of the Native mascot issue and people not mascots, obviously, like, we have our website, which is peoplenotmascots.us, which you guys can see. You can follow us on Instagram, which is also peoplenotmascots.us, and see what we're up to. We're not mascots on Twitter. You guys can do all of those things and see our CTAs there. But I don't, I also would encourage you all to do things that are important to your specific communities, even on the smallest level. I started this work about 2 years ago, and my advocacy work, actually no, I started this work probably like around 3 years ago. I created a Native American Student Union at my high school because I was being called slurs in the hallway, and I went to an upper middle class high school, white upper middle class high school. And it just wasn't a very safe environment for me. And it got to the point, it just kind of peaked when mock powwow was done around me when I was in sophomore year. And that was very difficult. But I remember just sobbing for the rest of the day because I knew I couldn't have my sibling go to the school to that school without any safe space for Native Americans to go to. So I created an American Student Union with some pushback on my high school, for a space where Natives could be in community, for a space where non-Natives could learn more about the Native American experience. And then COVID hit, so I was no longer doing NASU, Native American Student Union, and I was just a 17-year-old girl on my phone, on TikTok, making kind of comedy videos. But during the height of the pandemic, it was my mom who was just crying in the living room while everybody else was mourning prom and things like that. My mom was sobbing because we were seeing all the death toll numbers of what was going on in the Navajo Nation in response to COVID. And because our grandparents only could meet during church and things like that and there's also not great internet connection on the Navajo Nation, we didn't know which relatives, which close friends we were losing because we just didn't have any connection to those people. And also when we saw the rising COVID numbers, we just thought about all of our family on Diné, on our land. And so I took to the internet and I talked and I raised money for COVID relief funds. And And from there it grew. And then it came to a point where some people were talking to me about Native mascots and how it made them feel unsafe in schools. And that really resonated with me because I grew up in a really unsafe school environment. And so I made a Google Docs spreadsheet and I put as many Native schools with Native mascots on there with a petition to link so people could take action. There was around 200 schools on there. And then from there, I found a friend that could make a website, and we made a website, and it just has grown from there. But I guess all this to say is when you plant a genuine seed, you will get genuine growth. So whatever that you are passionate about, and you do it in love, that will continue to pay off. When you have your North Star of what you want to do, my North Star is positive Native representation in media. My North Star is my people. And when you have your North Star and you have your community and you know your people, everything becomes more cut and dry. Things become easier, everything else falls away, and you can just continue pursuing that. I have had made so many hard decisions that were made simple because it came down to the fact that this does not benefit my community, and so I can no longer pursue it. And that is just kind of what guides me and has always been able to clear things up for me. And I hope that that is something that I can impart, and I wish that I told younger me, because I think that younger me would not believe what I've been doing at all, that I've actually been doing this. Younger me would be so surprised that these little seeds that I created grew and are growing into a beautiful garden of things I could never imagine happening. And part, also I'd like to say, part of caring for your community is caring about yourself, because you're a member of your community. So making sure in your activism and organizing that you're taking care of yourself, and treating yourself like an important member of the community. Like everyone's an important member of the community because you are an important member of the community. But these are just some things that I have learned in the organizing and activist space, especially being like Diné in Southern Ute. Some things that I've just kind of taken with me. So I hope that I taught you a little bit more about the nuances of the Native mascot issue and showed you a little bit of my heart and things that you guys can think about. But yeah, thank you for listening.
I swear that is absolutely incredible, Lily. And thank you again for highlighting the fact that you jumped in so late into the webinar that we cannot thank you enough for taking the time to come in so last minute and bring this knowledge forward, and to bring your perspective in and telling your story. We appreciate it so much. And a quick reminder to everybody as well, if in the back of your head you're saying, I wish I could learn more about these Native mascots, I wish I could learn more about this movement, give Lily Joy a follow on TikTok with her handle, or on Instagram, because her Instagram is on there as well. All that information in the chat section as well. Leela, if you want to drop your info in there as well, go for it. Amazing people to be referencing and amazing people to be keeping up with. But thank you both so much again for that knowledge and bringing that forward to this space. With that being said, we'll go into kind of our more casual part of this program and a bit more of an open discussion, getting to hear your perspectives on some of the topics of Indian country today and in our communities, and Indigenous Peoples Day as a whole, because at the end of the day, we're here to celebrate Indigenous Peoples Day, and we're here to be here together. So with that being said, Leela, I'm going to kick it to you in the beginning on how did you spend Indigenous Peoples Day? I know it was on Monday, so we're going back in time a little bit.
Yeah, so our Native Student Alliance on University of Denver campus, we had an all-day event from 8 to 4 on our campus green. We kicked off the morning with setting up our teepee that we have, a very beautiful teepee painted by members of the community. So that kind of started our day. We made sure we took up that space, that this was our campus for that day. And then in the morning we had a Grupo Tolok, And they are a group of Aztec dancers, and they came and they shared with us amazing dances, talked all about them, their culture. We had a really fun friendship dance where they brought out people to like kind of lead us in the dance, because that's how their dancing works, is that the drums and everybody else follows one person instead of a group of people following the drums. So that was a lot of fun. We had a Cheyenne drum group come in for the next half of the day. And so they were singing and drumming. They did a round dance. We had a potato dance, which was a lot of fun. And we actually had a lot of non-native students stop. We kind of like timed it well, so it happened during a passing period. So we had a lot of non-natives come up and be like, what's going on? And we convinced them to do a potato dance, which was really fun. And so, yeah, and then we had food. We had a few students and community members do some spoken word pieces. That was really powerful. And then we wrapped up the day. We got an hour-and-a-half break, and then we went to the School of Music, where those drum group singers were also doing a presentation and a panel. So overall, it was a really amazing, beautiful, long, exhausting day. But yeah, it was a lot of fun, and it was honestly probably one of the best Indigenous Peoples Day I've had in a while. So
That's so great.
yeah.
I swear, doing a potato dance, I'm guessing y'all did it on Campus Green, that potato dance on Campus Green. You need a permission slip to do that. If random people are coming in off the sidewalk, I swear. That's edgy. I love it.
Of course, the powwow princesses won the potato dance, because we have two in our group.
That's unfair, I should say. But no, that's so much fun.
I also forgot to mention Latino Student Alliance helped us as well, co-collaborated. And they talked a lot about as well the indigeneity and Latino community. So that was also awesome.
So great. No, we have some great relatives there over at the University of Denver, and I'm happy to hear it went well. Lily Joy, how did you spend your Indigenous Peoples Day?
So my Indigenous Peoples Day was a roller coaster. I woke up I didn't really wake up. I took like an hour nap, and then my friend picked me up at 3 a.m. and we carpooled to Santa Fe, not Santa Fe. I think Santa Fe, because I'm from Albuquerque. San Francisco. I get the SFs mixed up. We went to San Francisco, and we went to Alcatraz for sunrise ceremony. If y'all don't know the history behind Alcatraz, it's really, really cool. But basically, there was like boiling it down like to something very small, really amazing place of Indigenous resistance where Native people occupied Alcatraz. Yeah, just place of resistance. Really amazing. You guys should like look up the history of Alcatraz. But we were there for ceremony that morning. It was really amazing. Really, wow. It was great. It's just also to know that that was a place of Indigenous resistance, and to be there on Indigenous Peoples Day with Indigenous people across the country was fantastic. And then we had to get back to campus because one of my friends had to go back to class. On our way back, we got into a car accident, which is I really am big on honesty, so I didn't want to like skip over that. But it's okay. Everyone's fine. The car's a little jacked up, but it's okay. But everyone in the car was fine. But because of that, I was kind of startled. And so I just kind of slept for the rest of the day, didn't go to my classes. I was like, it's Indigenous Peoples Day. I'm going to go to sleep. And so I went to sleep, and then woke up for the vigil at 7 p.m. That just was a lot of Native performances from Indigenous people all across campus, which was in the center of campus. It was really beautiful. And then after that, I went to sleep. So that was my Indigenous Peoples Day.
What a roller coaster. Okay, yeah, you're right. That was a roller coaster. I'm so happy to hear everyone's okay, though. That's huge. Much deserved sleep. That is crazy. But, oh my goodness. It sounds like everyone had a very eventful Indigenous Peoples Day for sure. Well, no, and I appreciate y'all coming in so much at the end of this week here. Everyone is always so busy at the beginning of this week, so we want to make sure that we could have this on Thursday. I was really fortunate to spend my Indigenous Peoples Day with family and community, getting to spend some time having some good conversations with my loved ones. But it's interesting because reflecting on my Indigenous Peoples Day this year and other Indigenous Peoples Day, that kind of leads me into the next thing I wanted to talk to you all about. Was Indigenous Peoples Day is a great day of celebration, great day for Indigenous people to come together into community, but also an amazing opportunity for us to educate, for us to kind of hold space within conversations that perhaps we aren't given or platformed for in the other days of our year. But one thing that's always kind of come up for me is Indigenous Peoples Day is a great opportunity to educate people on certain topics. And oftentimes I'm asked about land back, the land back movement, this concept that is a very large idea, and having to kind of explain that to people. But I wanted to ask you two, scholars, both of you attending university right now, amazing activists, amazing spirits to be with. What do you say when someone was to ask you, what is land back? What is this land back movement? Lily Joy, do you want to kick us off for it?
Absolutely. So land back is it's complex and it's not. It's when people ask me about land back, I always have to preface with like a lot of it has to do, it's in part very philosophical. It's an outlook on life, just to dedicate yourself to decolonization. But a lot of people like, and to just like to rethink about our relationship with the land, what ownership of the land even means is a whole conversation and concerns to land back. But I think I think what's most important when it comes to land back and people who are non-Indigenous knowing about what land back is just really in essence letting the guests, which are non-natives, of our home, Indigenous people's home, give ownership to the owners of the home. And this can be, I heard a really good metaphor in that, like, so let's say Indigenous people were like, had a little house, and we knew how all the houses, this house is super old and we've been cultivating, we know all the quirks, we know how to take care of the house, we know all the different ways to like make sure that it's okay and it's good. And people come and enter the house and they throw all these people into the basement and they lock them up and they treat them really horribly, and they just kind of mess up the house. And then all of a sudden, so years go by and the house is messed up, the plumbing doesn't work, they don't know how to do anything, but all those people downstairs that they like kind of sequestered away do know how to take care of the house. So land back would be, first of all, reparations, paying those people that they locked down in the basement and treated horribly, but also letting those people who were down in the basement, like that didn't have any say, have a say, teach people who are now guests in the home how to act and be a guest in the home, and let those people make decisions about what goes on in the house, is kind of the most basic way I can describe land back to non-native people.
That's a great visualization too. I think for especially some of those bigger concepts, being able to bring them down into something you can really visualize is really important. Leela, do you have anything you'd like to add on top of that, how you maybe explain these bigger concepts?
Yeah, it's funny. I always kind of have to start off with like, it's not an eviction notice, because it's honestly kind of ironic that that's exactly what non-natives think, is that when we say land back, we're saying forcible removal. No, that's what happened to us. That's not what we're trying to do. And I think especially in terms, of environmentalism, and I really, really loved your metaphor of the house, and like the plumbing and everything. I'm gonna have to use that in the future. Is that is land back is Indigenous environmental justice. Land back is a huge part of it. And the interesting thing is we have like little examples across the world that we can pull from. Like in New Zealand, there's this river that they gave voting rights to, and then so an Indigenous person from the tribe that's right there on the river is kind of like the proxy for it, but that river gets to vote on what happens to it. And I believe in like 2016, 2017, Bolivia also had a whole rights of nature initiative that they were trying to push through the government. I don't think, unfortunately, politics happen and everything, but it's just this idea that we're putting the land first, and the people that know how to take care of the land, that know how to nurture it, how to, use it best. And that's the indigenous people. And again, that also includes so many other things that Lily Joy brought up, like reparations, things like that. But yeah, it's really interesting to me when we talk about land back, how scared people get. And yeah, it's not an eviction notice. Like, we're not trying to kick y'all out, or like, it's just about acknowledging that there were original people on this land, and that those people know how to take care of the land, and that needs to be acknowledged and have reparations paid for.
That is spectacular. And between those two, I could not put it into better words, but what this really brings to mind as well is kind of this idea of that house analogy, how there's different rooms to the house, that land back really being a multifaceted idea and a multifaceted issue that has a lot of different fronts. Leela, whether it's within your work of environmental justice, Lily Joy, your work around bringing recognition to those people, bringing those positive representations of those people, whether it goes to a legislative level at like that legal sense, whether it goes to the ways we educate in school and in education. It's so multifaceted, and there's so many different, I would say, fronts to the land back movement. And those fronts are ever changing. There's new players every day. There's old traditions that were being struck down and new systems that are getting put forward, effort and work being done by young people across the world, absolute inspirations. But I'd be curious to hear maybe your take on what is the future of the land back movement. What does land back look like 2 years from now? What does land back look like 5 years from now? Or maybe what you hope or what you think it might look like. Leela, do you want to start us off?
Yeah. Yeah, I think, it's important to note too that like land back is not just, a North American or American idea, that there are indigenous peoples around the world going kind of through the same thing. And so I guess when I think of the future of land back, I just think of this overhauling of justice done, this acknowledgement that yes, this was, this land has been severely colonized, been severely settled on, been like we were literally pushed into reservations, like we're called sovereign, but in reality we're not really. And so kind of just this, I think, the first step is acknowledgement, which sucks, but that's kind of the hardest part, is so many people are just in such deep denial about everything, or just ready to move on, that is really hard to start any real conversation until that point is kind of drilled into people. But the way I hope to see it is that there are just more Native voices in decisions that come to the land, that come to the environment, that they are brought in to, for example, like when I was at COP26, there's this meeting done about the climate damage and loss to the land, to these people. No indigenous people, no local communities were invited, and it was 25 minutes long. Like that's how they had scheduled for loss and damage. So just being able to have these conversations in a meaningful way, that's not a quick little bulletin check off, and inviting these people who are experiencing the hardships that happen on these lands and that know best how to fix it in their community. So that's how I hope to see it, is that there's people in power and that are in these positions to be able to start to make decisions for the land, and hopefully reparations to the people that were pushed off their ancestral lands. And again, it's so multifaceted that, like you were saying, Mason, there's just so many different ways that it could grow. And so there might be parts of the movement where we don't see a lot of change in 2 years, and there's other parts where something might take off. And so, but yeah, that's what I really hope, is just to see more indigenous people and people of color able to take that agency.
Yeah, that agency piece is so strong and is such an important part of looking forward to that future. Lily Joy, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Yes. Yes. To what Lila has to say in terms of environmentalism, absolutely. I didn't talk about it as much, but like I am definitely a climate justice girly. I'm studying ethnic studies with my track being environmental justice right now. Like so absolutely in all the environmental justice fronts. But out and I say outside, but I don't really mean outside. Again, multifaceted, but also intersectional. Part of land back is also not going backward. I mean, right now we're seeing major hits to tribal sovereignty. I think something that's super important when it comes to environmental conversation is that tribal sovereignty is environmental justice work. We just saw what happened with Castro Huerta, and like that's going to disproportionately impact like the missing and murdered Indigenous people crisis. Like if you don't know what Castro Huerta is, first of all, do some reading on it, but it was a ruling that happened around July, June, right when Roe v. Wade fell. And that basically made it basically, in essence, it was a hit to tribal sovereignty, a really big hit to tribal sovereignty that SCOTUS did. And now they're looking at ICWA. ICWA is the Indian Child Welfare Act, which is also on the chopping block right now, foreseeable chopping block, which is going to be heard November 9th. By the way, if you guys want to do some action items, talk about ICWA, talk about ICWA, talk about ICWA, and talk about it also in an environmental way, because ICWA is the Indian Child Welfare Act. I have so much to say about ICWA. ICWA is so important for culture, so important for families, so important for Native children to have just a good quality of life. Definitely read on it up about it, but like in an environmental way, the people that are representing basically the people that want to take down a little bit of tribal sovereignty are people is Gibson Dunn, which represents companies like Shell, Chevron, like these people who have a vested interest in oil, because taking hits at tribal sovereignty is in the best interest of big oil. So in terms of like what is best for the land back movement right now, what's best for the land back movement right now is not going backwards, is backing tribal sovereignty, not being silent when it comes to these major hits to tribal sovereignty, and holding SCOTUS accountable, holding Congress accountable to fight back what SCOTUS is doing, not just that I'm sorry that happened, do something, fighting for executive orders from Biden to do something on behalf of ICWA. And that's what I see what's happening in the next 2 to 5 years, is us not just trying to keep what we have, but even going further and asking for more tribal sovereignty, asking for more funding from the federal government, more acknowledgement on the federal level, and actual action from Congress that isn't just land acknowledgements. And that was a lot, but that's what I have to say about that.
That is what we're talking about. I swear, I think that is one of the best, I would say, perks of being able to MC and occupy these spaces, is that the passion and the energy that you all bring to these spaces is infectious and is absolutely the motivator for that agency, for holding those fights and holding people accountable. That is absolutely spectacular. I see, looking at the time here now, that we're coming up toward the end of our program. But while I still had both of you here, I wanted to ask one more question. And Lily Joy, you actually mentioned this briefly in your talk earlier, but with land back, with all of these different movements that are happening, whether they're Indigenous communities or whether there are relatives in other communities, in other BIPOC spaces or in other places, there are so many young people all across the world who are joining together to fight back for a better future. If you had advice maybe you would give to them, or maybe to, like Lily Joy, in your sense, how you said your younger self, but if you had advice that you would give to some of the activists out there working today, what advice would you give? Lily Joy, would you like to start?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I said a lot of this earlier, but I also think it's very important when you do work is also just looking out. I mean, this also comes from a lot of Black woman theory. and like seeing what they have to say about racial justice. But when you take care of the most marginalized person, you are taking care of everybody. Once you make a place accessible for the most marginalized person, you're making it accessible for everyone. So just being very intersectional in what you do, lead with love, plant seeds in love, take care of yourself, especially if when you're movement building, because you are a part of that movement. When you don't care about yourself, you're not taking care of your movement. I think is also something really important to acknowledge. Yeah, uplift voices. Remember intersectionality. I think something that I wish I would have told my younger self, and this is something that people don't want to hear, I didn't want to hear at 17, is read. Like, if you want to know how to be a good organizer, read people who have done organizing in the past. Like I would, and talk to elders. We talk so much about like youth-led things, which are super important. But also I think that putting people into generational categories and not like, I've been in youth organizing spheres where youth get too cocky and they do everything without mentorship of elders. And then they make mistakes that elders could have prevented them from doing. So make sure when you do stuff, talk to elders, talk to people who have knowledge, be humble, work in humility, because working in humility is working in love. We can take intergenerational fronts to systemic racism, and that's how we win. When we take intergenerational, interracial fronts to systemic violence, that is how we win. So that is what I think I would have to say to that.
That is so powerful, and that is so amazing. And also one of the most tradish things anyone can ever say, just be humble. That I had $1 every time I get the take a step back, be humble. No, that's perfect, and some powerful words for sure. Leela, what advice would you maybe give to some of our youth activists? A dog mom.
Sorry.
Cosmo, I know it.
It was Cosmo. Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I like to say at my that my friend Marion actually once told me was, sorry, Cosmo, he's getting mad, was rest is radical. And that when we do this work, it is hardcore work, and it takes so much from us. And these systems, these people, these structures that we are fighting are relying on that. They are relying on us burning ourselves out. Yes, joy is also radical. Oh, I love that. And so just acknowledging that when you need to take, I'm so sorry about my dog. It is acknowledging that when you take a moment to take care of yourself, and when you step back and you put that work and that passion that you have towards the movement and put it back to yourself, that it's not going, the movement's not going to fall apart without you. There are amazing people that are going to help support that gap that you had to take a step back from, and also support you in taking care of yourself, because that's just the most important thing in this work. Is it gets really exhausting, and it's really hard, and it's oftentimes super personal. And so just making sure that you're taking care of yourself, and you're not, driving yourself to burnout because you're so passionate and so caring and so amazing. Just give yourself some of that love and that joy back that you have towards your work, and put it back to yourself. That's what I would have to.
Burnout, and not to cut you off, burnout and martyrism is colonial. It's
Boom.
colonial. Don't do it. Don't be a martyr for a movement. Work with your communities. I wish I would have told that to 17-year-old me. You're not a martyr. You're not superhero. That's a colonial shit. Sorry, I don't know if I can touch that. That's colonial stuff, okay?
Yes.
Don't do it. Work with your communities. It will save you so much silly ego, silly things, and you can. That's when you get more work done.
Exactly.
That is absolutely perfect. It reminds me of a song. It's a good day to fight the system. In one of the lines in it, it says that when one of us gets tired down, the other ones will hold it down. What a great way that we can take this forward. What a great philosophy that we can carry it all forward. Luiseño, how you talked about that we have so much knowledge within our elders, within our community that we can draw from. I hope that anybody who's seeing this can draw some wisdom from these two wonderful people who joined me here tonight. You both are an absolute inspiration. And that I gotta say that, especially for, our young scholars, people who are doing the work academically, doing the work in the community, is an absolute honor to share space with you all this evening. So thank you both so much for taking the time to be here. And thank you so much to all of our participants for attending this evening. To anyone who will be watching this session has been recorded, so please share this around. And I wanna say happy Indigenous Peoples Day, and say that, very briefly closing out here, that Indigenous Peoples Day is not a singular day on a calendar. Indigenous Peoples Day is a commitment to one moment where we can reflect on how for 364 other days we can better service the original stewards of this land, that we can better help our Indigenous communities, how we can be standing in solidarity with our other communities, our other relatives from other identities. When you reflect on Indigenous Peoples Day, I implore all of you to take Indigenous Peoples Day as a commitment to every day forward, that it is not one day a year, but it is a moment where you can reflect on how you are helping to serve the Indigenous community. Ways that I've always recommended to other people is by platforming. When I say you should definitely follow Lily, Joy, and Leela here, I don't just mean on social media. I mean follow our communities, follow our struggles, and follow our progress. Do not become a passive observer. Become someone to help us build a brighter future, one that we build all together. I want to say thank you again so much to you, Celebrate Diversity, for bringing together young people every single year to talk about these issues, to plan and to work within the communities, to be able to listen to some wonderful people like that are here this evening, and to give me personally this opportunity to engage with people who really are the foundations and the forgers of what our future is going to be. So on behalf of all of you, Celebrate Diversity, and on behalf of our organization, and for me and my family and my relatives, I want to thank you all again so much for being here this evening, and have a happy Indigenous Peoples Day.